Welcome to episode 155 of Stageworthy. I'm your host, Phil Rickaby. Stageworthy is a podcast about people in Canadian theatre featuring conversations with actors, directors, playwrights, and more. I want to take a second to talk to you about a show that I saw 2 years ago, so you can't see it now, but it was put on by a company called Eldritch Theatre, and my friend Adriana said, Phil, you have got to check out the stuff that Eldritch Theatre is doing, because you won't believe it. And so recommendations are a big deal, and so when somebody recommends a show to me, I try to see it. And so I went with my friend Haley, and to be honest, our minds were blown. Eldritch Theatre combines theatre and magic and puppets and horror, and it was like nothing I had ever seen. I left elated. It was the kind of show that left me elated when I left. I marveled at what was accomplished by one man, magic and puppets. Eldritch has a new show coming up, and I wanted to take a second to talk to you about that because we partnered with Eldritch on the podcast. So we partnered with them for a contest to give away some tickets to the latest show, Space Opera Zero, which is not one man, puppets, and magic. It's two women, one man, puppets, magic, and who knows what all else. And so what we want you to do is to go on social media, find the post that I made today on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And so find that post and tell us, by replying to the post, what kind of space monster you would be in the space opera of your life. And then we'll choose a winner from those entries to get free tickets to any performance of Space Opera Zero from Eldritch Theatre. While you're on social media, if you feel like dropping me a line, remember the Insta and Twitter and Facebook. That's at StageworthyPod, the website, stageworthypodcast.com. And if you want to drop me a line directly, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Phil Rickaby, and my website is philrickaby.com. If you like the podcast, I would love it if you'd leave a comment or rating on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. But you know what? Even more than that, you know what? Say hi. If you've been following for a little while and you like what you've heard, say hello. Just give me a wave, whatever it is that you want to do. Or even better than comments or ratings and all that stuff, if you know somebody that you think would like the show, tell them about it, because you know what? Some of my favorite podcasts became my favorites because somebody I knew told me about them. My guests this week are Siobhan Richardson and Jade Elliott McRae of Crux Encounter Productions. Check out Crux Encounter's Why We Fight, November 17th and 18th at the Redwood Theatre in Toronto, and online streaming, so make sure you check that out. And check out their podcast, The Crux of It, which you'll find on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
I find it harder. The smaller houses without mics is always the worst, and that's when your technique comes back.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how people rely on it, and then it goes away, and there's whole new generations that can't do it.
I was talking with, when I was in the rehearsal hall at the opera, I was talking with the guy, and we were talking about opera, and when opera tries to do something else, but there are things that are called for it because it's opera and the vocal production that you have to get. And when musical theater, like things musical theater can do, because we're not in general, it's being mic'd.
Yes, yeah.
So that it can do different things with the voice because it's not requiring the same production as an opera voice is.
Yeah. I mean, of course, there was a time when nobody was mic'd. In the musical theater.
I kind of miss that.
Well, I mean, as soon as you added amplified instruments, you had to mic the...
You can't tell where anything is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So let's start talking about stuff. You've got the new company.
Yes.
So I know nothing about this. So tell me.
Yes. So
tell me about it.
This is the big thing. This is what we want to talk about all night tonight. So Jade and I are. I don't want to play with that because it's going to make sound.
It's okay. Just don't need to freeze.
Jade and I are starting a theater company. Well, it's a performance company because it's not just about bums and seats. But let's start with this.
Okay.
It is a company of resident actor fighters.
Okay.
So that all the work that we do is great theater, of course, but also has very strong elements of stage combat and fighting in performance. And so that might go anywhere from classics to new pieces, from serious, deadly, horrible revenge tales to slapstick.
Right.
Because the amount of skill and timing and interpersonal connection it requires to do that stuff effectively.
Yeah.
So the idea grew out of many things, but one of them being what a joy it is to work with people at a high skill level. So we wanted to give ourselves the opportunity to be performers in an environment where we're working with people of something closer to an equal fight skill.
Yeah, it's interesting that most of the stuff that we've worked with, it's always, as fight directors, we're always working, and I don't want to say down, that's not the right word, but you're working with beginners a lot of the time.
Oh, sure.
So you end up teaching as much as you're directing. And
Yeah,
so
the first thing you do is like, here's how you hold a sword.
Yeah.
This is how you move back and forth with it in a way that makes it look like your character knows what they're doing.
And so when Siobhan and I started talking about this, it was about, well, what if we started a company of actors who knew those things, and what could we create then? What would that look like? And that brought us to the thing that audiences more than likely have never seen a professional do this work. They've always seen amateurs.
No, that's true. Because you're right. We whenever I've done stage combat, there are a few people who've done it in, like, unless they've been to a theater school that has it.
Yeah.
Even then, chances are they did it
many years ago, and they haven't necessarily maintained it. And that's, of course, never to diminish the hard work that people put into preparing their roles, but it's a very different thing than doing it every day. I mean, I like to look at the parallel of what's the difference between an actor who can, like, sing in the shower, an actor who sings, and an actor-singer.
Yeah.
Like, our understanding of what that collection of words means is different. So many people are like actors who have done a fight in a show now and then, as opposed to on the other end of the scale, which is the actor fighter who works this stuff all the time, perhaps works daily on these particular skills, which means that they have a different facility with the physicality than someone who's like, and then I'll pick it up out of the back closet and brush it off in time for the show.
Sure. Well, the training part's the part where we're really interested. It's like what to get to the stories we want, the communication that we want, to the ability to do the things that we want, was going to take the training and a dedication to it, so that we could then start with a blank slate and then create something not only for us to play in, but the art form to flourish in as a separate and complete performance art, as opposed to just an add-on to a show. And it doesn't mean that the shows we're going to be working on are specifically only fight.
No.
But when it comes to that, it will be done at the highest level possible. Yeah. And Siobhan loves to say the national ballet of stage combat. Well, it's funny though, because the stage combat thing is, it's the parallel to dance is so close and parallel, to use a phrase. Semi-different, but that's the thing is, like, I remember one of the first classes I took, someone said, oh, this is just like doing martial arts. And everybody in the room was like, who has trained, was like, no, this is not. You're not able to do real martial arts. You're not. You're doing a facsimile. And once you've done both, you realize very quickly that last 3 inches where you make contact on purpose is a world of difference.
Well, I mean, I've actually seen people who know who do martial arts have a lot of trouble with stage combat because their body is trained to not stop those 3 inches, but to make the contact. So they can make it look real, but by being real. Yeah.
And I don't know about anybody else, but I really don't like being punched in the face very much, which is why I don't seek it out very often.
Yeah.
And especially as actors, right? Like, it has to be sustainable. You have to be able to do it 8 shows a week plus the fight call.
I'm a headshot.
right? Like, 8x10s are less expensive now than they used to be. But,
True,
you still want to keep it up. And, yeah.
Well, I mean, you were saying about you mentioned like slapstick as one of the things that can be done. And I'm, as somebody who has as you know, a slight obsession with the silent era.
Yes, we've done a little bit of that together.
For reasons. The amount of work that, say, a Buster Keaton or a Charlie Chaplin,
right.
like they were virtuosos in their physicality. That takes work.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
And
practice.
you can't just do 2 weeks of rehearsal and be that good.
A slightly more recent example, Lucille Ball. There's all those anecdotal stories of spending hours and hours on a single blow up a paper bag and burst it gag to get it hilarious, to get it perfect. And it's that kind of dedication to single moments, and then stringing together those single moments and stringing together those single moments in concert with another person. And each person is slightly different. Not only is their physical instrument slightly different, the psychology they bring to it is slightly different, and we're all slightly different on different days. So part of what we have the joy of doing is diving into how deliciously complex this art form can be when we're looking at what are the various minutiae that we get to work with when we get past that first layer of, well, I hope this ends at the right point. I hope this sword stops at the point I want it to. But now we can go, it does stop at the point I want it to. And I hope it ends. I hope it stops.
Nobody dies today.
But when we get
that, I was like, oh my god!
I'm not gonna lie. I've been involved in a show where that was actually a question one night.
Yep.
Oh yeah, I've been hit on stage repeatedly by the same person. It was unpleasant.
Yeah. So that when we're working with an ensemble that's together all the time, then we can really start playing with the minutiae of that distance. What are the tolerances there? If we use a mechanical term, how close can we get? Can we get within, give or take, 1 centimeter? And what does that do for our sight lines? What does that do for our audience? What does that do for the actors moving off of each other? Because the stimulus then becomes very different, and the trust built between us is very different.
Well, if you're working together all the time. Then there is a certain amount of trust and a certain amount of comfort that comes from, like, there's the trust that just naturally is there because you work together so much. I mean, could Jackie Chan have done all of the things that he did if he didn't have his dedicated team of stuntmen that he worked with every day, all day?
Probably yes. He could.
Well, possibly yes, he could, but
it would be a lot more difficult. Yes. And the things he did do became more possible because he was with people that would throw themselves onto the line.
Yes. There's no way that he could have done all of those set pieces if he didn't have absolute trust with people who knew him, and he knew that.
And but also the thing, when you do stunt like that, you're putting your lives in the riggers. And the riggers are usually generally parts of your team. And the team is like, I'm literally suspended over this. Now Jackie's different because he generally didn't use rigging.
No, that's true. He just threw hopefully somebody's going to catch him.
But they were ready there with an ambulance and an ice pack.
Yes, he knew the ambulance driver.
Oh, he's so insane. I love him. The best possible. I mean, insane. And just like there's never going to be another one of him because
nobody else is going to do that kind of thing.
The dedication though that he had shouldn't say had, but he doesn't do the same stunt anymore. But
but I mean, we've been talking about this too. Is that part of what we're looking to foster with this company is also the evolution of the art form. Like it's not that it's not happening on its own, but if you look out there at programs like So You Think You Can Dance and how dance has evolved over the last decade, because of those kind of programs and watching the physicality of people develop, and also science is moving ahead, right? Like we have older Olympians than we have ever had before because science can support the body doing that work. So which is great for someone who's like, I'm starting to I have to warm up and I have to cool down. Right, the body is starting to do different things. So one of the excitements for me about this company is we're giving ourselves the opportunity to see where this art form can evolve, not only with how science can support us and how the research that we're doing then feeds into like, ooh, this is historically accurate, and look at these martial artists we're working with. Oh wow, there's time in there that I didn't realize existed before. We just created time. But also science. But also taking a look at what people are just doing. Like parkour is a thing now, and how do we put that into our shows, into our theater shows, and how do we add that to our martial skill and our martial storytelling? And what does that do for our storytelling and for the art form, and how does that affect our audiences?
How do we bring it to new audiences is the other thing we're looking at.
New audiences, pray tell, Jade.
Please, Jade, what do you mean by that?
Do expound.
Siobhan and I were talking about this, and I had an idea, and we were talking about it and furthering it. And I'm an old theater hand. I've been doing film and theater my whole life, but I've always preferred, since birth, I literally preferred theater to film. I love film, and I love the perfection of it when it comes out at the end, but I always never really understood as an actor how little my performance mattered until it hit the editing room. Yeah. And the director and what they were telling me, because when I would think of a bad take, they put it in, I'm like, wow, that looks pretty great. And I didn't see that at all. You see the daily and you're like, eh. Yeah. And then you see the film and you're like, whoa, hey, look at me, I'm all handsome and stuff.
But I mean, the film is really a director's and an editor's medium, sure. Right? Yeah.
But unfortunately, the theater is waning or dying or not being as prevalent in our society. And one of the things that really stuck, the real beginning of this for me was the thought that films used to be made of plays and books, and now plays and books are being made of films. And when that started to reverse, really interesting things started to happen to the theater because it became less relevant about the stories we were telling. In some ways, this is a large, broad stroke thing. But I was talking to Siobhan, what if we got new audiences into the theater by simulcasting everything from the ground up so that people who are now watching the front load, which I call a front load of all the work we do up until the point of the show and then watch what happens. Right. There's something, sports are still that way. Yeah. Live theater, these live TV shows that are going on are becoming a thing. People have a hunger for that. If we can make that a thing, that puts audiences anywhere in the world that we need to produce. Yeah. Less bums in seats, less money for house costs, less runs of shows, but still from a live theater. So the experiment we're really running, aside from making a home for stage combat, is to create a home where theater can thrive all over the world with a single show.
And especially with something like what we do, while violence and storytelling is like so fascinatingly so prevalent and everywhere, there's something about like the uber nerdery of what stage combat and Western martial arts and martial arts and performance is that we would like to reach all of our friends and colleagues around the world who have a particular nerd-like passion for this work, and at the same time reaching people everywhere with a particular kind of work that we're doing in theater. But let's say you live even 3 hours away, you can't necessarily come and see it. And I've always been very excited about the idea of, well, it was a big question for me. How do we reach that one youth in a town of 300 that doesn't realize that this is a job you can have? Yeah. So that when Jade came to me with the idea of like, why don't we simulcast everything? Why don't we make sure that our online presence is part of how our company lives and thrives year round? Then I went, well, there you go. That's how we reach out to those folks who are the one person in town and the one person within 100 kilometers who's interested in this and wants to do something with it. So,
and the byproduct of that is also that the company doesn't have to be registered anywhere. It can go anywhere and work with anybody, because I'm really excited about telling stories all over the world and working with different companies all over the world and just picking up and bringing an audience with us without the logistic nightmare of trying to
get bums in seats.
Yeah. Now, when you're talking about simulcasting, are you talking about just the performance, or are you talking about like rehearsals, like when you say everything, do you mean everything?
Yeah, we're working on a comprehensive program. Now, Siobhan and I are of the older school, let's say, of development of things. I'm a believer of not, and this is where I'm getting old in my age. I don't put things out that aren't finished. Right. That's not to say that we don't want to show how things are made, but there'll be a tailoring of that content. So the content will be available through different sorts of things.
Yeah, we're definitely looking for like a certain level of polish and a certain level of finishedness to what we do. Because it's a different thing to put out like, oh, this is the really hard part of rehearsal where we all feel awful, and this is where nobody knows what they're doing yet. That's not to say that we never will, but certainly when we're establishing the company, we're definitely looking at saying, this is where we're looking at going. And then we will, we'll look at opening up further and further parts of the process as we go. Yeah, but that's, if you want the first look at that, you should join our Patreon page. Yeah,
we've got some stuff in the works that there'll be a combination all the way through with live and canned, as it were. So there'll always be, we think, as we're developing access to performers and so forth, we're working on some Twitter stuff, and we're working on some live video,
like Instagram
vloggy type
takeovers
things, and so there'll always be an ability to access the company through an audience, but the performances will be curated and created in such a way it'll be exciting for everybody.
It's interesting. I was just talking with Sue Edworthy this past week, and one of the things that she mentioned is that we forget, because we do this all the time.
Yeah.
That our audience doesn't know.
Yeah.
How, like, everything that happens to them is magic. And what do people want to do when they see magic?
They want to know
the secret, right? And so to be able to give people a glimpse behind the curtain and to see that sort of thing is sort of it's a gift to them, but also like they get to feel like they're in the know.
They're in the know now. It's very much about striking that balance. Especially so as we're talking, we're like establishing the company. So that's why we say that it's at first, it really needs to be about like, this is what we make. This is our take on it anyway. This is what we make. So there's a sense of like, what are we looking at as far as the end product we're moving towards? And then we can look further and further into the process and a few secrets of like, well, this took 10 hours to make. Yeah. This moment, actually, for whatever reason, this scene came together in an hour. We have no idea. Or we have strong suspicions because this is the discipline everybody's super comfortable with. So of course it came together like that.
Yes. We're also teachers at heart as well. So part of the company's component at some point will be online lessons and teaching and access to us that way, as well as saying, I want to learn how to do that. It's like, well, we can help you do that even if we're not in the same city. Yeah. Not all the time. Sometimes I shouldn't say sometimes. At some point, you'll need to be in a room with somebody, but that doesn't mean you can't learn a lot satellite with things. And the way technology is going with, VR and AR.
I'm so excited about augmented reality.
It's going to be very interesting. And
nice.
We'll play with some of that.
One of the things, have you ever seen, just like thinking about like the behind the curtain stuff, some opera companies literally show behind the curtain stuff with like quick change stuff. Like, I've seen a couple of videos of like and they have a timer. It's like, and here our chorus comes off stage as one character. 30 seconds later, they have to be on stage as something else. Yeah. Here's what happens. And they just sort of like have this video that sort of runs showing all the things that happen behind the scenes. And I know I ate that up. I know a lot of people ate that up because it was like, oh my God, is that all that stuff that happens?
I'm telling you.
Scene changes. Yeah.
And the most I ever had, I think it was, I had a costume change that was in 11 seconds.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Full costume. From a full 3-piece suit into a jailbird outfit and a new entrance. And with professional dressers, I ran off the stage and stood with my arms out and ran back on the stage 11 seconds later. They did everything. Yes. I was like, and I just step into my shoes, step up, and up I go. And with all the secrets of
one does need professional dressers to really make that work.
I'll tell you,
a team of people to do that.
I've done a lot of quick changes in my life, but that one I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Shout out to the technicians.
So are there people who are already part of this company aside from the two of you?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. So are they people that you have worked with before? Are they new to you? Like how did you find the people who are going to be part of the company?
It's a bit of a complex question only because we have we have so many people around the world that we would just desperately love to work with, which is part of our reason for wanting to travel the company. The people who are with us right now are some of the most beautiful souls and wonderfully beautiful hearted people that we know. Yeah.
Talented.
Yeah. So how did we find them? At this point, it was people that we knew we could spend lots of time with and whom we knew we could work with. And luck was part of it. There's a couple people who was like, oh, how are you here? This is fantastic. Please come and be with us.
Yeah. And the company will grow and expand. And we're doing sort of a bare bones at the beginning of just the people we wanted to work with. Yeah. And not to say who are available, because I don't mean that that's why they're in the company in any way, shape, or form, but it actually worked out that we were all here. At some point, the biggest dream is this, that the company will exist with all the people we can get from all over.
Sure, yeah.
Like cherry pick the people that we want to work. Like we have
A friend in Finland that we want to work with.
Yeah.
And,
when we conceived the company, we were like, wouldn't it be great to work with him? It's like, yeah, and he would do it. It's just we're not there yet.
Yes, yeah.
It's not like transplant his family to Canada kind of a place.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so when we get there, that'll be closer. And then there's also there's conversations to be had with how we make this art in the professional theater world and film world, because we've got to make sure we do all across all our I's and T's with unions and all that stuff too. So we've got to make sure all that's fixed.
Is that something that is a concern at this point? Like you don't know exactly how that's going to work, or
Equity and ACTRA don't have clauses yet for specifically live simulcasting. Yep. There is like live capture. There is the opera has a clause for live simulcast if it's for free for an educational purpose to a particular kind of institution. So the unions don't exactly have a clause for this yet. So it's part of the conversation that we're having right now. Is how exactly do we figure that out, and what serves the art better, what serves the artists better, and so that's part of a conversation that's happening. We're not actually the only people who are looking at some of this, but we are among very few that we are aware of. So it's part of it is us talking to these other folks who are looking at simulcasting for live theater, because they're doing quite a bit of it for music. So symphonies are simulcasting quite a bit, and it's slightly different than Broadway live in quotation marks, because they may be capturing it in front of a live audience, but they're often doing pickups.
Right. The live stuff that they're doing on television, the NBC stuff, is all live. They're doing that one thing. Yeah. But the budgetary constraints and
seemingly lack of constraints.
There's that.
Well, I meant ours, but not theirs. Yeah. Our budget don't allow for that same pay of 7,000 people for one show kind of thing.
No, but there is certainly technology is changing the way that theater is created and consumed. And the people who are making there are gatekeepers who are not capable of moving that fast.
Yeah, and because the gatekeepers are not necessarily one person or one brain, but an entire organization.
And they have a bureaucracy and a certain understanding of how things work that moves slower than the technology does.
Yes.
And that's just inherent in
the pace of our digital lives. Yeah.
So
you have a problem and someone creates an app to fix it tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? Yeah.
And we're arguably we're in a very old business and an old business model.
Yes.
So it's going to be very interesting in the next 3 to 5 years of how it changes, whether we're on the forefront of it or not. I hope we are, think we are, in the sense that as far as the research we've been done, and this is not if anybody's listening to this in the whole world and it goes out and they go, we're doing it, well, we'd love to hear from you.
Yes, please come talk to us.
We're the first company of this size that's starting from this size as a digital and live theater company from the ground up, with the consideration that it will all be accessible. It will all be watched and created and curated, so that allows us to work in both mediums at the same time. We're also training the actors and ourselves to work in both mediums at the same time, because there's an inherent difference how the two digital lens captures in the human eye. Yeah. And it's really important to me from the very beginning, and Siobhan, if I may speak for you in this one moment, that live theater is still a major component. We will still do film. We'll always do short films. We will have desires to do create films you can only do on film because those stories are exciting. But the live theater component, there is something about that I'm not willing to lose in my life and in the world. Yeah. So if we can somehow help shift to both, so people can watch on their devices if they wish, while still realizing that people are doing this right now, right in front of you. Here we go. Good luck. Yeah.
And that's part of the joy of what we do, is this idea as theater actors. We a colleague of ours, Megan Cook, who's in Vancouver, she said it to me best, I think. When we fight, we are often running a sprint at the end of a marathon. It's so often the climax of the story. So we've already spent 2.5 hours on stage, or even like in a short play, you already spent 80 minutes in an emotionally taxing experience, and then you're expected to run to run these sprints, incredibly present, responsive to the other person, and that to me is one of the exciting parts of our live performance. The idea that people are doing this right here, right now, no breaks. If they mess it up, they fix it right away.
Yeah.
But what you're seeing is something compelling and something true in this instant, and we're not cutting away from it.
No.
We're right there, and you're watching someone do these actions.
So it's a grand experiment, and it's going to be very exciting to get it going.
And that's part of the reason why we have the people that we have, is because we know we can trust them. We know we can spend time with them. Not that if we haven't talked to you, it's not because we don't trust you or we don't think we can spend any time with you. But
you can't put everybody in the show,
right? We can't put everybody.
Not
in
yet,
the show.
but we will.
But we will.
Are you are the people in your company?
Yeah.
Are they also like? Do people take turns like picking up a camera and stuff like that, or are there?
Everybody, we're startup in that sense.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a job or multiple jobs. We've got people doing social media. We've got people working film and doing editing for us. Some of the trailers are edited by one of the company members. We have so many people helping and creating in a very, very large amount of stuff to do with very, very few people, which is how theater startup.
That's startup culture right there.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing that's missing from theater. Is that sort of like
that entrepreneurship?
The entrepreneurship.
Okay, so if I may, I am going to plug the startup company program that the City of Toronto is running with Artscape, where they have a creative entrepreneurship program, and it's one of the early things we did as a company. Actually, was sent me to business school for a week, and this is specifically for entrepreneurship. For creatives, and I learned so much.
Yeah.
All actors, all creatives, look up intellectual property. Know about it. Understand what trademark is, and understand what your rights are, and how to sell your rights, and how to make money off of your rights, because your art is made to be consumed, and people enjoy consuming it, and you deserve to be paid for what you do and what you love and what you're good at.
Yeah, it's funny when Siobhan went to the school. I mean, I was taking it satellite with her because I was working another job at the same time, but we were doing the homework together and writing
and Google Driving everything.
Yeah.
It was really interesting. Being an entertainer my whole life, how little I've thought about the marketing of myself. And now we all do it, and I'm not saying that I don't have my website, my this, or that, but the actual business speak of what it is to create a business, they're realizing that I am a business and how much I did not know about that and what I am worth through branding and through the stuff made me just go, whoa. Also, I'm not great at it, so that also made me go, whoa.
You're certainly not alone. I mean, I think that very few people who go into the arts are thinking about the business aspect.
Yeah, we have to be. We have to be both, because there's very few of us who are the kind of artists that can manage to have a manager outside of ourselves.
No, especially
we
Canada.
should know how to be both, but so few. So if people know how to think of things in a business way.
Yeah, there's kind of this like little conspiracy theory saying that actors don't know these things, and like people convincing themselves that they can't understand it, or that making money off your art somehow cheapens the art. But I strongly disagree with
a big
idea.
caveat that there are lots and lots and lots of actors who do know a lot about how they market it. They're brilliant at it.
Absolutely.
I do think that they're a little bit in the minority, though.
Sure, from a statement of myself, having been in the business and being relatively successful in Canada as an artist, I was really surprised at how much business speak I did not understand. And when it was explained what I should be looking at, how much it changed how I focus on things, and then to speak to the people who have the money. Now, I had this conversation with an artistic director recently, and they were the ones who were like, well, yeah. I was like, oh, that's right. Right, boards, money, funding,
I think that's what's one of the really interesting things about being an artist and an entrepreneur and being an actor, is that there's this kind of, in a way, a detachment between each of those mindsets. And so when do I fully step into my entrepreneur mindset looking at my product?
Yes.
And then when do I fully step into my artist mindset and the idea of business being like, well, that's something else. Right now, my job is to feel, my job is to offend and to be offended.
Also there's a certain amount of shame attached to it too. There's a weird mirror lens of actors.
The conspiracy theory of it.
Yeah, the weird actors. I don't.
Shame of
getting paid.
Right.
Like,
see the faces these people are making.
You're an artist. You do this. It's like
because you love it.
Well, it's like those memes that go around. Like musicians, probably one of my favorite. But it's the same thing for film. It's the same thing for any art person who makes
starving musicians, starving artists. Yeah.
No, but the ones who are like. the club owner sees, here's $100 for your night sort of thing, and then they give you a list of everything it takes to get to that night, the rehearsal, the this, the that, and that. Here's your $100, but you guys are overpaid.
Yeah,
kind of going, no. So
it was a big thing for me to realize when I thought about from the day of my first dance class to now, and that. So I'm bringing all of that into my rehearsal space, whether I'm there as a performer or whether I'm there as a fight director or some kind of collaborator. I bring all of that with me, and that's not a small amount of experience. I don't have a piece of paper to show you that I've done that. No. But that is a very particular skill set that I have built for that, and part of what you're paying is for that. They say like going to a graphic designer, hand them an enormous amount of money, and they give you a logo in 10 seconds. Like, I could go to someone else for half of that. Sure, but it's going to take them 10 times as long to give you what I just gave you in 10 seconds.
Absolutely.
It's that understanding of all your history, everything you've ever seen, read, felt, heard, done, studied. All of that is your history and your background and your schooling, and you bring that into the space with you.
Yeah. It's also interesting you were saying about, the musician and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So, we follow a musician, they get $100 from the club owner, and then they sign a label, and what do we say about them?
Yes.
They sold
out.
Yeah.
So they're getting paid, and now we respect them less. Which is a weird,
conspiracy
thing, right?
theory.
Yeah.
Well, hilariously, that's not going to be much problem much longer because labels and all that. All artists are becoming self-produced with this wave of the future.
But
right?
that's something that I think, and that's why the unions need to change a little bit.
Yep.
Because they don't.
They're not
They are slow to see how I, as a producer, am not necessarily exploiting myself, the actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're sort of like built to protect the actor from the producer. But when the producer is the actor,
help me.
Yes, exactly.
And it's there's a lot of stuff around this topic that's very interesting. I have heard it said recently that there's also great fear around it because nobody really knows what's going to happen. It's moving so fast and so breakneck that some people don't want to touch it.
Of course.
Because what do you do? And also there's one thing that I'm actually really nervous about is that it is the Wild West right now a little bit because it gives every artist the opportunity, if they're allowed, if there's unions are not involved in the moment, if you're an unrepresented artist at the moment, you can put whatever you want on the internet and watched more than a Hollywood film was made last year. It's possible. And that there's something really brilliant about that and wonderful. And I like that it's sort of unregulated at the moment, but that doesn't, I don't want to take away the safety of the actor being paid fairly for their wages or do you know what I mean? The conditions.
100%. There's a fine line. It's like, at a certain point, you have to be paid for the work.
Absolutely.
And if I'm sitting at home, I'm making little videos and whatever that is, and I'm getting watched by a whole lot of people, and now I can monetize my YouTube channel or whatever, and that's me. But then as soon as I bring other people in, they are now contributing, and I have to be able to pay them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that part can't be Wild West. We have to acknowledge that everybody who's participating in that is part of the process, and therefore needs to be compensated. Right?
Yeah, and at the same time, I have no answers for this, but put it up on YouTube. Well, how much of your money then is YouTube getting in that? So there's some questions there as to how are we accessing our audiences and who's actually making the most money and who deserves to be receiving a little bit more for the product they're putting out. That's one of
it's a really interesting thing. Like going back to the same model of protection, like the new way to disseminate music right now is the streaming services.
Yes.
And I hate to say as a musician as well, that I'm a member of one of them, but I love it because I have access to all the music in the world, and I use it all the time, and it's so wonderful. Yes. And then you think about the one recently, I think it was Bruce Springsteen. I may be misquoting that. Was it Bruce Springsteen? Anyway, one of the biggest artists in the world had said they released what they made for that song in a month. Yeah. And it's one of the most popular songs in the world, and it was like $127. Yeah. Like Born to Run or something, and you go,
who's getting the money from that? It's not the artist; it is the platform.
Yeah, and that's something we do have to fix while still keeping it affordable. Because one of the things that's great about these things is that people can enjoy brand new artists while still being a performer. I mean, I'm really interested in how, like a band like Walk Off the Earth is doing to me because
I'm absolutely
huge fan. I'm a huge fan of these guys. I would love to work with them at some point.
Walk Off the Earth when you need some fights for your next video.
Hey, you did a video called Kung Fu. We could do Kung Fu 2 with our company. That would be awesome. Just saying, shameless plug.
Absolutely, yeah.
Joyful plug.
Yes.
How they started on the streets of Toronto, then through the YouTube, and then when they put all of their stuff up through Patreon, through YouTube, to whatever, and they're one of the best touring concert bands in the world, and they do these covers all the time. So they're making money, they're living and working, but most of it comes from tours now. But they did it from the very beginning as a free platform thing, while still getting paid.
Well, that is the thing,
right?
is the
Premium
they're
models.
not getting a whole lot from the YouTube videos, or I don't know, maybe.
Well, they went viral with the guitar
well,
thing.
the thing is, they did, and so maybe there's money coming in. I know a couple of people who were making money off their YouTube ads for a little while, and making a pretty decent living at it, but. That's one thing, but the streaming services do not give what the artist is worth.
No, no,
they will. However, they could be seen as much like Walk Off the Earth. Like their money is coming from. They're doing like fucking stadium shows.
Yeah, now they are for sure. Yeah.
So like that is that's selling stuff, tickets, merch, all of that stuff.
So things I learned in the Creative Entrepreneurship Program is some of these ideas of like how do you plan for growing your business? I think sometimes we go, okay, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to be fine. But it's also, I just find this joyful creativity in going, oh yeah, there's this thing we might engage in.
Yeah.
Ooh, here's a way to talk to our audiences.
Yeah.
And just exciting ways to go, this is the thing I want to make.
Yeah.
And I want to find that 1,000 people who want to see it and would like to give me $3 a month to do that.
Yeah.
Like, and all the exciting ways that you can reach those people and you can talk to each other about it. And then the next step of then how do I grow that to the next level? And then how do I grow that to the next level? I've heard it said that Canadians tend to think small, and I'm excited to go, okay, how do I know what I don't know? Where am I thinking small? And where do I go, well, how could I bring more of this to more people in a bigger, more exciting way?
Yeah.
There's a creativity to it.
It's an interesting thing. I'm about to go way off topic here.
Yeah, we don't do that ever.
But I've been thinking recently about some of the main differences between the way we make theater in Canada and the way they make theater in the U.S. Say, for example, Broadway shows. Those are for-profit shows.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? People are making money on those shows.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the goal, is to make money. And we're making money. We're doing shows to get grants to break even.
Yep.
For the most part. Because we're not seeing our theater creation as a capitalist venture.
Yep.
Probably because we all think of we're like, oh, business, I don't have business, money, it's a thing, right? And so we're not doing it for profit in the same way. And so we're sort of hamstrung by our need to go cap in hand to the government all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I have heard it said, I've had this conversation quite a few times, and it's true, that even as actors, we approach our art differently. There's an inherent thing in the Canadians, and broad brush strokes again. There's an apology to our theater sometimes. Like if we're going to approach a difficult topic, there's always sort of like not always, but there's a general sense of apology. Whereas a lot of times in the States, the theater is in your face and they don't care. They're making what they're going to make, and that one difference applied to our funding models, really makes a difference on how we see what our theater is worth. That there's no apology in the States. There's an expectation.
I mean, one of the problems is, we've encountered issues where somebody is tackling a difficult topic. Yeah. And because there's government funding,
there's another voice.
There's a certain amount of how dare they handle this topic? There was a thing where the Toronto Sun went after SummerWorks a couple of years ago because there was a talk of a play that had to do with terrorism. And so they were going to the Prime Minister and saying, how can government funds go to this thing? And because it's public funded, we, I think, maybe don't go out for difficult topics in the way that we could.
Yeah, well, there's definitely an inherent carefulness with some of that. Like, you're not going to get a fully government funded theater thing attacking the government the same way you would as a player going, here we go.
Sure. But you mentioned your Patreon.
Yeah.
That kind of funding is like, yes, people, people are going to be giving money to you to make the work.
Yep.
And if they don't like it, they'll
not watch,
right?
Yeah.
And they can
or
watch.
they can engage us, and we can see. I like the idea of how do we keep moving forwards. I am sometimes frustrated by the situations or the cultures that go, offense, I go away now.
Yes.
And it's sometimes you have to. Sometimes it's like, this is beyond what I have the spoons to deal with, so I'm going away from here. But I really strive for, how do we as a community move forward? How do we as a community talk about a thing? How do we heal? How do we strive to make better? In fact, without going into it, as we all know, there's been a lot going on in the theater community over the last year.
Yes.
And some of the things that we're doing is we're taking a look at, like, well, what are best practices? Taking a look at various models and how people talk to each other and how people establish relationships. In fact, I read about a theater company that is not calling it a director. They're calling them a curator. Because there is a language to that is in some ways more specific, in that the director or the curator is drawing out bits, or in a way they're selecting and bringing together various parts of what the actors offer. Just as an example of, there are various ways that people are looking to take a look at the theater model, and we're not that we're going to throw out the baby with the bathwater. We're definitely looking at keeping the best of previous practices, but what are some of the neat things that we can bring to it, and what's some of the science that we can bring to it, and some of the research that's been done. One person we were consulting with talks about the principles of consultation, and how when one is having a discussion, the idea then becomes the group's idea, so that we release our ownership over the idea, and then we can actually speak of the idea and clarify the idea without assuming we have to take personal offense to it. And the idea that it's also your sacred duty to speak up, so that we inherently have a sense of everyone around the table has input on that idea. Now, that's not applicable to every situation or every rehearsal. Every once in a while, the director or the choreographer has to say, let's do it this way. We need to see the overall picture. And it's the actor's job to go, great, how do I justify the choice I need to make right now, so that we can all move forward with the actual intent, which is bring a story to the audience. So it's been a fascinating part of the research that we've been doing over the last year, is taking a look at some of the training and some of the ideas out there about communication, about community support. How do we talk to each other? How do we disseminate ideas? And that's been, I think, like a fascinating and delightful journey of going and diving deeper into it. I've been talking a lot about everything we do right now is a bit of like double click and zoom in, double click and zoom in, because everything is a spectrum. So how do we take a look at the ideas, and what's the specificity of this idea? So I nerd out a little bit on on words and specificity, which one could say is part of what makes me good at stage combat, is because I am detail oriented. I like to take a look at what's the slight difference between when my hand is turned this way and this way. How does my hand placement here in relationship to you change our emotional relationship, and also what does that inspire in your movement, because I've opened this line and closed another one. So how does that subtly affect what you do? So how do I be a better partner by, in fact, asking you into a different space, as opposed to sort of putting something between us and hoping that you remember what we choreographed.
So what is your first project?
Our show is called Why We Fight.
Okay.
Which is a fun way for us to get some of the ideas out of our heads and onto the stage, because part of the impetus for this show is to get to express that. Part of the reason I do stage combat is because I love the communication of it. I love the movement. I do love the form. As someone who, spent my childhood doing ballet, there's something to me that is intrinsically fulfilling about taking specific shapes in concert with somebody else. So part of the aspect of it is, why do we as performers engage in this art form?
Yeah, there's a whole... we originally came up with the title. It was the idea of why we as humans fight, but it also disseminates into why we tell the stories, why we're still fighting, why we're interested in it, why we like action movies, why all those questions are inherent in that idea.
Yeah, because as a society, we don't necessarily like violence, but the top grossing films are all action.
Our feelings about violence are complicated.
Yes, very complicated.
Because we like it. In fact, in some cases, we love it. We also don't like it.
Football.
It depends on what.
There's a context to it. There's like how deeply involved am I personally in that violence, and how deeply involved do I want to be? Am I someone who enjoys watching MMA, or am I someone who is training to be in the octagon? Am I someone who watches only romantic comedies, but there's also that part of me that gets a real thrill when it comes to the duel part of it?
Yeah.
It's one of the things that I'm always it sort of fascinates me, and I've sort of like people like, so why theater, why not film? And I'm like, okay, so here's my thing is we watch violence on film and television all the time. However, a slap on stage almost always gets a verbal reaction from the audience that never happens in a movie or television.
Yeah, it's
because it's right there.
Yeah, dissemination of it. Yeah, and that's part of the thing we're exploring with our company and with the show itself is what's the difference between the two mediums, how we're capturing it, but also how to deliver both of those experiences to both audiences at the same time.
And it's very different with fight work than it is with straight up scene work because of the movement of it, and the magic trick of it is really different.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's really technically interesting about what we're attempting to do is that the magic trick that we're creating has to be different on two different levels while working at the same time. So that's exciting for us and terrifying all at the same time. Oh, good boy. But the show is based around that idea of let's explore some of this. Let's look at why we're doing these things and creating a number of scenes. So it'll run a bit like the show is a bit in a way like a mixed program at the ballet where fully encapsulated stories will happen throughout an hour. The show will be about an hour.
Or like a short one-act play.
Short one-act plays, but they'll all be connected through a device that we're not telling you at this moment because it's secret. They'll be connected in that through line of why we're doing this and why, and we'll explore some of that. And there'll be comedy, and there'll be violence, and there'll be lightness and hardness.
Yeah.
We're not going to just sit there and like do gruesome Titus Andronicus the whole time.
The thing about
there's a time and a place for that, but
But like an hour of it is not much.
And also to be clear that it's not just, watching people fight the whole hour. There is storytelling involved, and there are scenes and acting and a wonderful dissemination of information to the audience. And remembering that conflict by its very nature is sometimes funny and interesting to watch.
Yeah, Looney Tunes.
Yeah. Oh, Looney Tunes. Now, when is this being presented?
November 17th.
November 17th. And where can we watch it live in person?
At the Redwood Theater.
Yeah. Where is that? I don't know that theater.
It's at Gerard and Coxwell.
Yeah.
I do. That was the center of gravity.
It was the center of gravity. And so it's been taken over and turned into still a circus school, but also it's a multi-stage and space venue.
Becoming Banksy is playing there at this very moment.
Yeah.
Will be the next show in there.
What's that? I forget the name of that company that does the film and acting.
The Secret Sessions.
We went and saw something. They did their.
They're doing another one coming up.
Yeah, it's a great space, and we're gonna use it to try and do something new. So it's gonna be interesting.
So that's where we can see it in person.
Yeah.
Can we also see it digitally, or is that something that's not going to be possible yet?
You can. It is going to be possible. We are still refining all of those details.
Okay.
Very likely, though, you will absolutely be able to get details through our Patreon page, through our website, and if you follow us on Instagram, you'll definitely be able to follow our story and our journey as we do that.
So what is the website?
The website is cruxencounter.com.
Okay. And the Instagram?
Instagram is Crux Encounter Productions.
Nice.
And it's encounter as in to encounter the crux of the situation.
Crux, the most important part of the argument. Ha
ha! Are you guys doing a podcast as well?
Yeah.
We are doing a podcast.
Selfishly, tell me about that.
Well, what's fun for us is it's an opportunity for us to nerd out on all the stuff we want to talk about. Whenever we do all of these like international workshops and we go places, we all have these wonderful little conversations in corners.
If I may,
yeah.
Some people may not know that stage combat artists or people who study this or who are interested in this, who will continue to pursue it throughout their lives, are probably one of the most highly educated groups of actors and people because they spend so much time seeking out other groups and going to workshops and conferences. And I mean, pick any one of our colleagues or friends who have done this, and they're just like, they go to 5 or 6 a year. I don't know any. I know very few other actors who train as diligently as some of these artists do. So when we get together, there are some fascinating conversations that range from, oh my gosh, if you talk to one of our mentors, I think Bob Sharon, he is a master of Fiore and Italian. You can explain it better than I can.
So he studies the Fiore treatise, Fiore di Liberi, the flower of battle. And he's more on the martial arts side, but in order to fully understand the treatise in its context, he studied the history of the time. He studied that specific iteration of Italian, taking a look at Renaissance cosmology, so that he could fully understand what are the images within this treatise, as well as the reasons for it being organized in the way it is. Now, there's several people, many people who study this treatise around the world, and there's conflict between
conversation, a difference of opinion. But to have a conversation that starts with, hey, remember that punch that happened this way that disseminates into 17th century Italian, which then goes to how MMA is doing, which then goes to how this gun was used in this movie. It's a fascinating conversation. So what we're trying to do with the podcast is take some of those little conversations we have that are just wild and weird and focused and concentrated about our art and how we make it, and wherever they go, and we're going to just put it on the thing, and it gets a little conversation about what we're doing and why we're doing it.
And it's part of what you were talking about before, some of the behind the scenes stuff. It talks. We've been going into some of our thought process when it comes to the work itself. Some of also taking a look at help me out here, my brain just
or how it affects the social fabric of our society and why we're doing this, why it's still interesting,
and how we're developing the art form itself. I mean, it's a very young art form, relatively speaking. I mean, if you take a look at when the fights started being choreographed, it was pretty much old Hollywood when we started choreographing them. And Fight Directors Canada didn't come around till 93, 95. So it's a very young profession, and it continues to grow, especially because around 2006-ish, we started having access to more and more treatises, to more and more of these old martial arts manuals, as it were. They're not exactly manuals. In some cases, there's a few instructional pieces. Some of them are actually more advertisements, like come to my school and you'll learn these amazing things. Right. My sensei's better than your sensei. A whole bunch of that in there. Or like, this person is teaching this way, and it's teaching our young men to kill each other in peacetime. When you read Silver's treatise, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to read that on the podcast.
So here we go.
It's so good.
So for the audience, this is exactly what happens in our conversations. Someone will go off on a top, and then we'll get really excited, and that's the direction. We'll go that direction until we ping off something. It's fascinating. So one of the things that's really, Siobhan was just speaking specifically in that context of Western martial arts, but we also discussed Eastern martial arts. We discussed how it affects us in society. We talk about comedy. I would love to talk to you about how you see slapstick and what the parallels
that's a great idea.
And how they did it. I mean, Buster Keaton, I'm unbelievable. I'm such a fan of his work.
But it's funny because when I first started watching silent film, I was like, oh, Chaplin. And then all of a sudden I started watching Buster Keaton. I was like, yes, Chaplin was good.
I love Charlie Chaplin.
You totally nerded out. You made his hat and everything.
I did. I did the research. It was like, how do you make the hat?
And just from a stunt and fight perspective. I mean, especially a stunt perspective. Some of the things that he was doing to himself to do what he captured on film with the basic technology of light and film is just astounding to me.
Don't get me started on the Playhouse.
Okay.
Don't get me because the first 10 minutes of the Playhouse where he's every character and doing a duet with himself on a broken foot. Come on.
I know.
Amazing stuff.
Anyway.
So we nerd out like this, and then some of what we're doing too is interviewing some of our colleagues from around the world who are working on amazing projects. Like some of our colleagues from Australia. Nigel Poulton has just done a Spartacus with the ballet.
The Australian ballet.
Yes.
Wow. You can see it online. You can actually see.
Check out the trailers. It's beautiful. So and like some of our colleagues from Sweden, and we hope to connect with some of our friends from South Africa.
And New York.
And New York, absolutely. Friends. So we've got lots of people that we want to bring on. But our first season is going to be about 8 episodes, and it's something that we're going to continue doing year round because we're looking at not only the shows that we're producing, but also what is our lasting culture throughout the year, and inviting people into we talk about doing this year round. So inviting people into that, so they see that what we do is not just we gear up for the show, we do a show. Hey, that's 3 months of the year, but it's a 12-month a year process.
And also the process goes into the creating. That one of the things I love about being fight director and fighter and all those things, that as a director, I find it interesting how deeply we delve into the psychological aspects of martial arts and fighting and what it does to the psyche. And we are very focused in some of that genre, but it really goes to the human nature of why we're doing this. And that's just our first show, but every time we come up against it, just to break it down for a quick second, what happens when a fist hits a face? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the simple thing. A fist hits a face. Well, did it come in anger? Did it come in humor? Did it come in whatever? You answered those questions. And then once you've answered those questions, what did it do to the person it hit?
Yeah.
And how do they feel about it? And then that one simple action is a careening action for the next all preceding actions. But how did we get to that? And how does the audience feel about it?
Yeah, like what is that emotional context, as well as what are the physical effects of that, and therefore how does that bounce off of the emotional context? So to borrow a phrase from a colleague in the South, Rachel Flesher, who's in Chicago, traumaturgy. What is the traumaturgy of that moment? So we can, it's just like your text. Your movement is just like your text. You have to look at it with that manner of detail in order to really mine it for all its information. And so it doesn't just become, hey, look, punch, 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 but it becomes, effect, cause, and effect, cause, and effect.
And once we do all the deep dive in each individual moment, then we can really start working on the overall encapsulating scene and how that ballet of violence will move through and tell the story that we're trying to create and make the points that we're trying to make within the text and the movable text and the movement of the bodies. And so it's that stuff's really fascinating. It's funny. We were talking the other day about, in one of the podcast recordings, we were talking about how what we do is specialized in such a way that when we're in a room as a fight director, a lot of the time the actors, while they do amazing research and I'm do all the work they need to do, when we do something, we'll recommend something happened to you recently. Actually, you're in a room.
What I was doing is Figuring Desire.
Yeah, and then people are like, oh, too much. And our job is to work that and sort of figure. But to explain to those people to do this, we think about this stuff all the time. And not in a weird way, but like the cause and effect of it.
Yeah.
And we spend time in those moments and really dissect what would happen and how you feel about it, how the character would feel about it.
Like, we're really comfortable with that idea of we can think about it and we can consider it, but also at the same time that doesn't mean that we're capable of doing it in our real lives.
Yeah,
I think
of
that's
course.
like some of the audiences and some performers' discomfort with violence or with violence in storytelling is because I can think of it, can I actually do it? And I think that's part of the question that we pose.
Yeah.
Part of the question we pose is, under what circumstances could you come to this level of violence? What has to be taken from you? What has to be threatened upon you? What has to be provoked in you to reach that level? And I think that's part of our jobs as storytellers whose stories involve a lot of violence is asking some of those questions and playing out those scenarios so the audience doesn't necessarily have to, but they get to ask that question within a specialized, detached context of a particular story. That once they've passed that threshold of the theater, then they're no longer in that context. The brain does this natural thresholding thing. That's why you're in one room, you're like, oh, I forgot that thing. You go to another room, you're like, what? Why am I here?
Yeah.
Because your brain is sort of thresholded into a different space.
Yeah.
So we can help them have that that consensual experience of violence that is yet still detached from their real lives and even from their existing experience by going into a space where the agreement is we're going to do some awful things. But it's
And
all
wonderful
pretend
things.
and wonderful things and joyful things.
Yeah.
And it's all pretend. And then you're going to be able to think about it. And then you're going to go away knowing that it hasn't actually happened to you.
Yeah.
Or the actors themselves.
Or the actors themselves.
Yeah,
It's a really important part of what we do, that there is enough there's enough realism for it to look real, and there's enough separation to realize that actor is fine.
Yeah.
And that's a really
because the
important
one thing
part of the
that
experience.
audiences don't like when they think the actor got hurt.
No.
Right?
Like-
you can tell.
Like,
Your lizard
yes.
brain goes, ugh.
Yeah. Because we can get really into the sword fight until somebody actually gets like
Stabbed.
you
Although
know?
I was having a conversation recently about how Hollywood has changed our perception of what that actually looks like so much that
Realize,
sometimes when it
yeah.
happens,
Yeah.
people don't know what they're looking at because it's such a non-event
Yes,
sometimes.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
someone gets stabbed and they walk off stage, they're holding their hands, you're thinking that person's going to be gushing blood.
Yeah,
blah,
yeah,
blah, blah.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, did you get stabbed? Yeah, I did. Oh, did anybody notice? No. Because you
Oh,
didn't.
my God, my God.
it's like I think it often happens during like the punch.
Oh, sure.
Right.
Well, I'll give you
because the punch.
Yeah.
You react one way to the punch in when it's choreographed,
Yeah.
and then when you actually get punched in the face,
Yeah.
that changes things.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
One of my great experience, one of the things I love so much, my personal love of MMA, is how it's changed how I choreograph punching. Because the knockout that I did when I was a kid, where you do 3 spins, fall over the couch, and roll backwards from a single punch, I may or may not have practiced that a few times. To when you see a guy get knocked out in the ring is really different. The stiffening and the falling over is not what we teach.
No.
Because it's not exciting, air quotes.
No.
To look at, but that's the reality of it. And would an audience know? Anyway, that's a whole different conversation of whether they'd recognize. But what they do realize is violence happening in real and violence happening. There is that lizard brain thing where it's like something's really wrong and I need to run away from this now. Their instincts take over that.
Well, especially when you're in a theater, when we're breathing together like that, when we're in a space sharing energy, you can feel that subtle shift of like the people on stage going, okay, stay in it, stay in it. Or you can notice just that slight change as the actor's body moves, or maybe not slight change, like someone does a shove poorly and then goes head over heels over furniture where you're like, I feel like that's not the way that was supposed to go.
I feel like somebody just got hurt when they landed.
Yeah, or like the thunk is really an uncomfortable thunk.
Yes,
like some of that sound design is actually is also part of what we do.
Yeah.
And we want our audiences to be uncomfortable within the realm of the story.
Yes.
Not uncomfortable as people.
Well, that's the thing. It is a subtle difference. It's like, we need to make them uncomfortable because of the show, but we don't want them to be personally uncomfortable because something terrible just happened on stage.
Yeah. And the thing is, as we delve into different versions of what our shows will become, our trigger warnings will get different. Like if you're coming to see, and the difference between this is where I get back to the nerding out for us, is what happens when someone hits you with a frying pan? So that's a simple question. I've got a cast iron frying pan. If I smack you in the head with
like
it,
for realsies?
oh, that's going to sound horrible.
Yeah.
But if I add the bong,
Well, then it becomes funny.
right?
Yeah.
Also, how I swing my arm with the frying pan becomes funny or not. My intention with what I'm doing that action. So all of that deep dive with a single action is one of the things we have to be very interested and careful about, is how we're crafting that for the audience to have that experience.
Yeah. I feel very lucky that I'm choreographing a few shows right now, and like I did a streetcar named Desire, and there was a couple of like, hey, and then do it this way, and the whole room kind of like, sorry folks, sorry, okay, everyone okay, good, okay, continuing on, and then I'm doing Rochdale up at York University, and it's like, all right, so Siobhan, make sure this is funny. I'm like, okay.
make sure. That's exactly what you want to hear. Make sure this is hilarious. I'll be watching and timing.
Every once in a while, I'm choreographing something and I burst into laughter because it's like, I'm sorry, my brain just went to the funny version of this. Or sometimes when the room is a bit like, ooh, this is hard, I'll go, and then we do this version in the comedy version of this show, just to help the actors like survive the end of the day.
Yeah, we want to make sure. That's one of the things we love about stage combat the most, is that people sometimes forget that what we're doing as artists is magic tricks. And that what we do is a dance with each other, and we're in it, and it is not hard on us at all. In the sense that, there's lungs and there's physical ability, but the violence of which we are performing on each other is not violence to us. We are sharing that energy backwards and forwards. But you, the audience, are horrified by what you see because it looks like you're trying to kill each other.
Absolutely.
I think that's like my favorite part of what we do, is that beautiful paradox where we on the inside are having this like joyful communicative experience, and the audience is having a completely different experience.
Yeah, we love what we do. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I mean, to be sure, there are some times where you look at a thing, you go, ooh, yeah, as an audience member, this is difficult. So how we craft it has to be considered. But when we're doing it, then it's just, I don't know. We were joking about, it's not me.
It's not me.
Somebody's popular.
Oh, wait, hold on.
Somebody got popular.
Can't be me. It can't be me. My phone's not on. Oh, crap. It is me.
I knew it.
You know what, though? I just got a new cell phone case, and I put it in, and I flipped up my...
He was all so excited about his new case.
It was me. Oh, no.
Okay,
the irony of
dear
this.
audience, this is this funny because we were talking about it before we got started.
You know, I made the joke. You know what? Isn't it ironic? Yeah, if your guy's a weatherman. Oh, no.
Like rain.
Yeah.
All right, you guys. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you
It's been a lot
for
of fun.
having us.
This has been a Homebody Productions production.